here we go. We are back. We've been going almost 2 hours now and meeting so many great people, talking and learning about their experiences, their work. Avid Productions, thank you so much for the headphones. They've been a huge help, especially with the smoothie machine behind us, with the band behind us, all those great things. So check out Avid Products. These great headphones, and they do a lot of great things. And I'm also excited because we get to bring in for the first time today, and I think the first time in the whole schedule, the only time, a fellow Massachusetts educator.
So, Mike,
Mike, welcome in.
Hey, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
And for those who don't know you or your work, share what you're doing now and your path to get there.
Yeah, well, it's been kind of I don't know, a unique path. I'm the principal at Uxbridge High School. It's a small high school, about 600 kids, grades 8 through 12. If you looked at the map and you tried to find the statistical midpoint between Providence and Worcester, you'd find
That's it.
Uxbridge. Yeah, I've been there now. This is my 8th year, which makes me the most senior administrator in Uxbridge. Which has been, part of the challenge is, obviously navigating some of the challenges of the last few years. And one of the things that I think we're most proud of is that our school's really on the map for how we integrate the partnerships with people on the outside to drive our curriculum on the inside. And it's become a really progressive place as a result in looking at that nexus and that sort of balance and that pendulum between skills and content.
So that doesn't just happen. It doesn't just open the door. Here we go. What is the work that you did to make that happen?
Yeah, so as a principal, I think one of the things that we started looking at was the needs of our students, and they were really clamoring for things that were more hands-on and for things that were less traditional, if you will. And so we really focused in on looking at career pathways, at looking at post-secondary planning for all students, and using some of the information that we were getting from our labor partners, the Chamber of Commerce, some of the local businesses, some of our parents that were saying, our kids are graduating with skill X or skill Y. And we wanted to integrate that in really purposefully. And we started having some really in-depth conversations. It sort of coincided well with our sort of initial look at like what we wanted our graduates to look like, some of that, like, 21st century learning expectation. I hate that term, but that's what we were looking at the time. And then just started to build these things really systematically and trying to make it so that it wasn't just this idea of college or career readiness, and that we were looking at a vision that our students would graduate and have difficult choices. And our kids K through 8 would come to the high school thinking they have challenging decisions to make. As you know, we have a great local regional technical school, and there's a demand for that kind of education. So let's figure it out and how we can work together instead of seeing us as a competition.
Absolutely. And again, as I said, those things don't just happen, and they also come with some successes. Recently, you were awarded something, and I'd love for you to share that.
Yeah, so in 2020, I was the Massachusetts Principal of the Year. In the years leading up to that, I think part of the reason was that we really started with a look at our school culture. We really built this idea of being able to collaborate well, to challenge each other, and for teachers to want to come in the building every day. It helped that when we were able to convince our school board and our superintendent that we needed to do a full revamp of our program of studies, that we were going to get some different staff. And that, coupled with some attrition in our staff, retirements of people who moved up or moved on, we were able to really redesign. And one of the words that I used, Matt, when we were interviewing people was the word courage. When we had new people coming in, it was, look, you need to have courage to say, I have some ideas and I think we can do things differently. And for the people who were in the room interviewing their future colleagues, they were hearing that you also need some courage to say, I think we could do this differently. And this person who hasn't been in the building for 25 years might have some ideas. And we talked a lot about that in bringing our people closer together and then building these sort of interdisciplinary themes around those skills that we could say, like, look, it doesn't matter whether you're in world language or history or tech ed or English. You need to be a confident communicator. You need to be able to manipulate technology appropriately. You need to be able to present for an audience that isn't just your peers. And we've done that, I think, pretty well.
Awesome. I would say pretty well. You've been awarded, Principal of the Year. Your school's recognized, and you're bringing those skills down here to New Orleans. In the session you're doing, leveraging industry partnerships. First of all, when is it? And for those who want to go to it, what's the highlights?
So I think one of the things we like to try and talk about is how bringing people from the outside initiates a conversation and a compromise. And I think one of the biggest takeaways I got several years ago, we were able to take a trip to the Nashville Public Schools, which had a really great and robust programming on career education. And one of the things they talked about was there's an inherent compromise when you bring people from the outside that say, look, we need our learners who graduate to be able to do this.
Mhm.
Well, that skill, whatever it may be, might not fit into the curriculum as it currently exists. And there may be some things that teachers have to adapt. And I think that conversation and that collaboration, that dialogue is incredibly important. The other thing that I think people can get from the session I'll be running is that this is not independent of college preparation. Like when you start talking about career partnerships and skills, it doesn't necessarily mean that your student isn't going to go off to college when they graduate, which is a real reluctance from a lot of traditional high schools. They think
Sure.
about AP, they think about the data metrics, they think about all of these different things, and they're like, well, if my students are doing internships, that means they're suddenly not going to a four-year school. That's not necessarily true. I mean, one of our students who's been involved in one of our career pathways talked to me the other day about being a dosimeter. Now, I've never heard that term.
Yeah.
It's the person who works in the medical field that ensures that cancer patients get the appropriate dosages of radiation and chemotherapy.
Oh, wow.
It's pretty specific and not
Right.
something she would have done without our engineering program or that work. And the other part of it is sometimes the feedback that you get from people on the outside is very different than the feedback you and I give as administrators to students and staff.
I'm sure.
Sometimes you got to learn how to handle that a little bit.
Absolutely. So one of the things I've always liked about FETC and talking with Jen Wombold about it is bringing in more than just tech educators, where you're a high school principal, a recognized high school principal, but you're at a tech event. How do you see those two things running interchangeable?
Yeah, it's a great question, Matt. And I think one of the things that is important for our staffs and our students to understand is that the actual hardware, the actual technology is evolving so quickly that our ability to adapt and our ability to recognize what we need to bring into a school as leaders, as students, as faculty is very, very different. I mean, you and I went to school probably not too far along from each other. And, you remember the TI-82 graphing calculator.
Sure.
And there were math teachers in 1996 when I was in high school that were saying, you can't have them use a calculator. They're never going to learn how to do the math. And now we have to counter with artificial intelligence that's teaching kids how to write or writing instead of kids. So what are we doing to embrace some of these different challenges that are out there, because they're not going away? I'm old enough to remember going to the library to scour through books to make sure my students didn't plagiarize an essay. That's where the interface happens, is that you and I are now in a world where our students are going to have to adapt to technology tomorrow that is very different than what they're being trained on today.
Absolutely. And I think you're just being extremely kind about we're close in age, in the sense if you were in high school in 96 and I graduated in 89, I think we weren't that close. But I appreciate it coming on to a live broadcast and saying that. You also share, besides leading a session on leveraging industry partnerships, you had a video about it as well. So for those who go to this YouTube video, what are they going to see?
So it's funny. I just came out of a session here where it was about like innovative instructional practices in staff meetings and professional development. And the lead off question was, what do people look for? And the first arm that went up used the word engagement. And I think we hit these words sometimes to the point where you roll your eyes.
Buzzword bingo.
Yeah, exactly. Let's talk about engagement and choice. And there's a that's what you're going to see. Is you're going to see students who have walked into a room, and it's almost what you don't see is that these students walk in and they are on point. They are engaged with their teachers. They're engaged with the process of learning. They're actually not afraid to fail, one of the hardest skills there is to teach.
Yeah, and that's hard to get across to teenagers.
Isn't it? I mean,
Yeah.
everybody has a core value of perseverance out there, or grit, or
Grit.
everybody loves
Buzzword of the week.
bingo. Here we go.
Yeah.
But I think if you talk to our students, they've tested a prototype in multiple places. They've gone through that sort of engineering design process, and we have staff members who use that same language regardless of the discipline, so that when students do a retake in math, they understand this isn't a sign of failure. It's a sign of perseverance. This is just how we do business.
So, 2 questions. When is your session?
It is tomorrow afternoon, Tuesday afternoon.
Okay, make sure to check that out Tuesday afternoon. And the other thing that I think you're modeling for not only the leaders in your district, the leaders here, is that you flew down to an event Monday morning. You're already in a session learning. What else are you looking to take away from your time here?
You ever see the movie City Slickers? You know how the
yes.
Okay, so I remember when Curly says, to Billy Crystal, it's about one thing.
Yep.
And he spends the rest of the movie trying to figure out what that one thing is. Well, that's what it is. You're trying to find something that you can bring back and make actionable and real for people around you. And to be honest, I've already gotten something like that out of an hour, because I'll admit, this is my second trip to this particular conference, and it can be very overwhelming. I mean, there is just a deluge of stuff. You get into the expo center, and there's all these different great ideas. And last year I walked out of here with or where it was last year with all of this great information on VEX kits that have now integrated into our robotics program. Our media teacher took a workshop he went to at this conference about the gamification of his curriculum and revamped everything that he did for the whole year. I don't necessarily think it has to be that much of a Band-Aid rip. Like, it doesn't necessarily have to be something that huge. I just learned something on how to make my meetings more interactive using a different platform. That is something I struggle with, admittedly. So if I can find, one or two gems like that out of a few of these workshops, a few things that can make me more effective, more efficient, and perhaps more responsive to the needs of the staff and the community, then everybody wins.
Absolutely. And everything you've talked about here for the 15 minutes is around collaboration. It's around learning. It's around giving. It's around connecting with folks. What does Stronger Together mean to you?
It's funny you mentioned that. It's one of the terms that we actually put on the back of our T-shirts when we were emerging from the pandemic. We had put that as our theme as a staff. One of the things I often say to our leadership team is live together, die alone. And I actually just used that last week. Whether you're talking about a difficult budget session or making conversations meaningful about learning metrics, we're stronger when we're working at this together and using each other's feedback. I think one of the other terms that I take out of it is the word that the genius is the room. It's not one person in the room, and that's what being stronger together really means.
Awesome. Well, thank you for taking your time out of your busy schedule to come down and check in, come and share some of the great work. If you haven't had a chance to see Mike's work, go to his Twitter handle below or go to a session tomorrow and reach out, because you can learn a lot of great things.
Matt, thanks so much. And we'll see you back in the New England where people won't be woolly hats when it's 50 degrees out.
Absolutely. Have a great event, Mike.
You too, Matt. Thanks so much.